And then the pandemic came. So I saw you before that when you were in the studio.
Yeah.
And then all of that happened.
Yeah.
And again, for someone like you that's been studying the markets and writing books about them and trading them, that must have been wild for you to witness. And maybe what happened isn't what you expected to happen, or didn't. I know that I was locked up and just ready for the stock markets to fall down. I was going to board up my house. Then they bounced right back. And I was like, wow, this is just fascinating. And I never saw this coming.
Yeah.
Did you? And then what did you make of what happened? And then, post that, how does that lead into permanent distortion?
Yeah, so I mean, I never thought that once that sort of genie was out of the bottle of central banks being able to just help bail out Wall Street and other international financial centers around the world, and had since 2008 through 2019 in different ways. When the pandemic hit, it was clear to me that they were going to step in and do something. Why? Because they could. Because they could create money. And when money was basically, choked because the economies were all shut down, they didn't have that constraint. They could, the amount that they created, the fact that the Federal Reserve, for example, in the U.S. doubled the size of its book, meaning they fabricated more money in the months that followed March 2020 than in the entire set of years from 2008 up to 2020. Like, they doubled the amount of fabrication of money, just like that. And it was like, wow, if actual real people could just do that all the time, what a weird world it would be. But when the Fed does that, and the Bank of England, the European Central Bank, when they all do that under the guise of helping the economy, what was fascinating to me was not as much that they were doing it. It was how much they did it. Yes, it was just massive. But also that everyone bought this story that they were helping the real economy. And like you said, what we saw was markets just zoom up really, really quickly while economies were still closed.
Yeah.
And yet the narrative remained and still remains, even though they've changed some of what they're doing. They're now the Fed is raising rates, and they're supposedly reducing some of that cushion to the markets. But the reality is they're not reducing much of the cushion very quickly anyway. And yet we're supposed to believe now this is helping the economy. It could be painful a little bit, but it's helping the economy. So this idea, this false narrative that the Fed or the central banks are some sort of like economic heroes for the working class or Main Street, that's the part that, when I think about the term permanent distortion, when I selected those terms specifically to describe that distorted effect of what's happening in markets versus what's happening to real people every day on the street in their homes, paying their bills, going to work, has just become so out of whack that it's not just a reaction to an emergency. It is, in fact, a permanent condition.
Yeah. And that's why I love this term. And I've never heard anyone coin it before until you have here with the book. But this permanent distortion, because you always hear biggest bull market of our generation. And then you ask the average person, did you make any money off that? Nope. Are you struggling? Yeah, I got real problems. And now we're looking down the barrel of inflation, power outages, energy crises. And your average person in the real economy, as you say, is not benefiting from this other, financial market economy. And this is this distortion that you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And all of those price increases, particularly in energy and food, fertilizer, different things that impact people's real home budgets, like every single day. Decisions as to what to eat and when, and whether they can go so far to work or not. All of the decisions that have to be made on the basis of what they make not matching what things cost is very real. I mean, that those are experiences that people have on a regular basis. And so when you see the market going up dramatically, or even when you see it going down a bit because it's shaky, because the Fed and other central banks might increase the cost of the availability of money to the markets, it doesn't change the fact that they're not getting better either way. They're not getting better when the markets are zooming up. They're not getting better when the markets are choppy and going down because rates are rising. They're not actually doing better regardless of what these central banks do. And yet again, this narrative, and this is why I wrote that book. I mean, I wrote, the last book I wrote, which was Collusion, How Central Banks Rigged the World. They did. They basically rigged it on behalf of the financial markets and on behalf of the lack of transparency as to what things actually should cost and should be valued at. But then they just went way more steps. in the wake of the pandemic, and they used the excuse that they were helping people, when no one was really helped by this policy. And now their new policy is supposed to, again, sort of stabilize inflation. Well, last time I checked, the Fed cannot reduce your electricity bill. They can't find oil, sort of anywhere. They're not about that. They're not about, creating a pipeline or doing anything. They can't reduce the cost of food. They can't reduce, world hunger. There's nothing they can do. And yeah, you got Jerome Powell and all these central bank leaders talking about how they're going to fight inflation to help people. And it's just like, who out there really thinks they're being helped by these institutions? And yet, the news, the financial news, basically hang on what these people say.
Hey, it's Brian Rose, founder of the DeFi Academy. I've told you, my 4-week crypto bootcamp is amazing, but don't take my word for it. This is what my students are saying.
The DeFi Academy was an amazing experience for me. It took me totally out of my comfort zone.
In this course, I was challenged, I was held accountable, and pushed to do things that honestly weren't always easy.
It's been phenomenal, and I can't believe we're already up on our 4 weeks. It has flown by.
Going through this DeFi accelerator by far was one of the best courses I've taken.
You do this course, you really get into the nitty-gritty of the activities that will make you comfortable with decentralized finance.
Thank you so much to Brian and everyone at London Real and the DeFi Academy for even putting together an amazing course like this.
Anybody else that wants to do it, please sign up. It is well worth the money.